A lot of people in this industry look at like launching a token as the finish line. We're just starting. You know, it's inherently a permissionless platform.
Correct. Scoop, we're gonna build shit. Welcome back to the roll-up. For today's video, I sat down with Vice Krishnan of the Eigen Foundation to talk about the Eigen token unlock. The entire Ethereum ecosystem has been waiting for this since the announcement of the Eigen token, the world's first intersubjective token, several months ago. Today, the transferability mechanism has been unlocked and the Eigen token is officially trading. We talked about the Eigen token utility, the AVS ecosystem, the future vision, and a lot more. Let's jump right in after a quick word from some of our awesome partners. Here we go.
Cartesia is your home for app-specific rollups. At the forefront of developing new tools and platforms that enhance the capabilities of blockchain technology, Cartesia enables applications that are flexible and built to scale. Build on a full Linux environment and use traditional software libraries, but in blockchain development. Go to cartesia.io, that's cartesia.io, to learn more about building your own app chain today.
Welcome to the Ignition, Mantle's newest campaign to liberate the growth power of Bitcoin. FBTC Ignition has officially begun with a total token supply of over 2,000 FBTC with a TVL of over 150 million. Right now, you can go on the FBTC website to see all of the featured campaigns, staking opportunities, and liquidity pools where you can utilize FBTC on-chain today for some of the best yields available on L2s. The Ignition Sparkle campaign can be found at fbtc.com/ongoing-campaign. All right, we're live in Singapore. Happy Eigen Token Future Day. Congrats, man. It's been a long time coming. I know that you recently switched from, I think it was like the labs to the foundation. So
That's right.
You're leading efforts there.
Working with the amazing group of people at the foundation. Again, a great few years at labs, like been there since day one, and you know, still very close to the entire team there, but there's a lot of work to be done on the foundation side as well in terms of getting things up and running. Obviously the token itself, which came through the foundation and the work from a lot of people here. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's been one of the probably, if not the most anticipated drops. I mean, ever. Definitely like this cycle. I think I want to start with just kind of the way you guys went about this. I think when the points meta was going on with, you know, Pendle and LRTs and these things, the hype and excitement was super, super high. And then you guys decided to launch with this non-transferable token mechanism, as well as this kind of idea of intersubjectivity, which I think the community was a little bit like thrown off by. Talk us through kind of why you guys made that decision like that, why you didn't just launch the token with transferability, and kind of what the results of that have kind of been so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, most projects did a stake drop. We did a lock drop, right?
Yep.
And there have been a few other examples of lock drops, but probably not something of this scale or this sort of like impact or immediate reaction from the community. I think there were a lot of things that we got really positive feedback from the community about, which we took into effect and like made some, changes and reacted positively to the input. And then on the flip side, the reality is like, I think no matter what you do, you're never going to make everyone happy.
Oh, airdrops are the most polarizing thing in crypto.
Exactly. So I think the real question became, how do we make sure that we're protecting the honest minority, who is the real like community in this process, and making sure we're not, making decisions based on this like loud majority voice that like doesn't necessarily have the best interests sometimes. And then there is this like true majority, which like is this community of builders and participants that want to see this ecosystem grow and like grow in the positive ways. There's a lot of complexity behind why we did a lock drop. I think the main thing was like partially legal, partially like how do we start introducing We recently introduced like other ERC20 standards to be able to be deposited into Eigen. So like, how do we expand the set of this ecosystem in like a very stable, safe manner before we unlock and allow people to transfer, etc. So it really became this thing of like, how do we kickstart the flywheel, and how do we make sure that the flywheel is in this like smooth operating flow before we start introducing new variables into it. And also just like with the state of, you touched on the intersubjective token. This is something that like we wanted to create a token that wasn't just something that, one of the main focus points of Eigenlayer is to make sure that the value accrual of all these projects that are building on the Ethereum ecosystem go back to the ecosystem itself. And creating a token that would have just been launched to act as, some sort of gas token or some sort of like non-utility token would have taken that value away.
Right.
And so by creating this intersubjective token, we were able to come up with this consensus mechanism that people can use using the Eigen token for these social consensus problems throughout the entire ecosystem. And I think then that becomes like far more interesting, where the token isn't just the only product. There is a product associated with the token itself.
Right, like it takes time to kind of build that out and have something to show prior to launching. That's
correct. And now we're at the point where we're focused on finding the right partners who want to implement this token and start building this out. And, you will start to see rollups and other projects using the Eigen native token as part of their social consensus mechanism and start using that for forking. This actually also like goes in hand with something that the Ethereum community was speaking about in terms of not overloading Ethereum consensus.
Right.
Right. And like, as a result, we tried to come up with a mechanism that like prevents from overloading Ethereum consensus and keeps a lot of these social consensus problems native to the Eigen ecosystem. And we don't have these like constant escalation methods. The way I think about it is like, you would have escalation methods in like, let's just say school, right? Like you have an issue with an individual, so you escalate to a teacher, then you escalate to like, maybe the teacher escalates with parents, then it goes to a principal, then it goes like above and beyond, and so on and so forth. And similarly, like we wanted to create these like very structured, stable escalation mechanisms and keep it as natively within the Eigen ecosystem as possible. And it just takes time to build out these sort of like both cryptoeconomically secure, while also like, the engineering efforts to implement these two things.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you get some of the pushback about slashing just being for Eigen token versus kind of ETH, and like when slashing's enabled, but it's just kind of like partial slashing to start, and then you kind of have to work towards ETH, and then eventually more assets. It's kind of like how you guys opened up caps to deposit in the beginning. It's consistently been a slow and kind of like steady process, and I think that sometimes the community finds that a bit tough to understand.
Yeah, I think it goes to this like bigger principle, this meta principle of like the stability versus agility trade-off.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like different projects and different ecosystems have their own thesis about which of these they prioritize.
Right.
We have always erred on the side of stability, especially when you're handling, billions of dollars of people's assets.
Correct.
You can't, build fast and break shit.
No.
Right. Like that's just not the way you go about doing things. And so, yes.
And I think you guys have more responsibility and are held to a certain level of accountability than other projects in the space.
And we take on that responsibility and try to move with, very methodical and very thought out approaches. And as a result, we are not the fastest moving teams at times. Right. But we, make it a point to put out solutions that have very stable and very like structured formats. Yeah. And as a result,
here, the token's launched.
Exactly.
It's gotten to the point. So now I guess we can kind of think about like, what does this mean for the ecosystem, for the projects building in the space, for the industry, and what does the transferability of the Eigen token mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Eigen token is now transferable, tradable, available on, these markets and exchanges and things like that. So people can actually buy and hold this as part of their crypto portfolio. And then, going downstream to the AVSs and builders that are inside our ecosystem, they can start implementing this natively into their into their rollups, into their, AVS stack, bridges, etc., where this sort of social reputation layer that exists with the social consensus layer of the Eigen token can be used to solve some of these intersubjective problems throughout the crypto ecosystem, right? An example of this would be like the data withholding problem, which exists in DA, where you don't have clarity on whether the node operator who was supposed to serve or the node, the data requester are being honest, and which is the honest party. And so you can resolve some issues like this. There's a lot more applications that will have a lot of content out in terms of what are some of these intersubjective faults that exist within the ecosystem, and we can go deeper into that as well. So yeah, I think that's part of it. And also just I think it's important for the native utility of the Eigen token inside these ecosystems to start expanding, and we start eventually introducing the Eigen token into what is a far more like institutional manner. So one day it's possible that Ethereum ETFs are natively restaking onto Eigen, and so we're seeing like capital inflow into the Eigen ecosystem that is coming from like very stable, very structured institutions who have a far more rational yield expectation rather than some of the mercenary capital that has existed in the entire ecosystem to this day, where it becomes very difficult in terms of Sybil resistance to identify who is a honest, benevolent participant in your eco.
Vertex Edge is now live on Say Network. Say users can now trade 50 plus spot and perp markets with the unified order book liquidity of Vertex Edge across Arbitrum, Blast, Mantle, and Say. The next 6 weeks, 850,000 Say tokens will be up for grabs as trading rewards every single week, exclusively on Say. Join Vertex on Say Network now on Vertex Edge. That's vertexprotocol.com. Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal, the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fraxtal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fraxtal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fraxtal mainnet. Bridge your tokens and bring your Frax assets into the Fraxtal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fraxtal. You are still early. Join today. Take part in our expedition into the singularity.
Now, yeah, you kind of touched on a couple here, and I'm curious if there's anything else that's from the foundation's perspective on the roadmap side or initiative side. What does that look like for you guys now that token's transferable?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now that token's transferable, it becomes a lot easier to do things like grants.
Yep.
It becomes a lot easier to do things like governance. We are actively working on our grants structure, and we have a few grants already out, a bunch in the pipeline right now.
Yep.
It's about going out and using the resources to fund what we describe as our responsibility to participate in building the infrastructure to onboard that next generation of users to crypto. There's a lot of great infra being built, and that infra is now being consumed by some consumer applications. And now we need to go further and further downstream and align with the right partners to make sure that we're coming up with really like positive incentive mechanisms for this user acquisition problem, which is how do we get users onto crypto? And the reality is like a lot of the technology can be abstracted away, but consumer distribution will win markets, and we need a way to make sure that the teams that are working on that consumer distribution have an incentive mechanism that they can go out and use.
Yep.
And perhaps that's the Eigen token, perhaps it's their own native token, perhaps that's being subsidized by the grants that we're issuing.
Yep.
Right? There's a lot of factors here, but yeah, it's super exciting to be able to do that.
It just feels like the ecosystem's being turned on, like the entire thing, right? Like slashing is eventually going to come, if just for Eigen token at first, I believe, correct? And then eventually other assets. So the AVSs can start to kind of like, operators can start to delegate, understand like what's, it just feels like everything's going to be turned on, and
Absolutely.
like the experiment begins in a very, experimental manner in the beginning, but a cautious and steady kind of outlook. Like it just feels like it's a culmination, and it's like, okay, now we're starting what feels like the beginning of it all again.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people in this industry look at like launching a token as the finish line.
This is like opposite. Like
yeah, absolutely. We're just starting. Yeah, we're just getting started.
Like the whole mechanism requires the token and eventually other assets.
Exactly.
And
we're excited to have more and more internal tools and products that come out from us and from the AVS ecosystem that effectively is using the Eigen token. Stuff like Eigen insurance wouldn't be possible if we don't have this intersubjective token layer where we can do slashing, where we can do things like this, where bridges can eventually use the Eigen token to buy insurance and protect assets in transit, things like that, where it just wouldn't be possible. And so to your point, we're just getting started.
Yeah. And it does feel like the number of AVSs is significantly increasing to the point where, during this series, we've been like particular just to make sure that each team is like, they're building. It does feel like there's going to be teams that are just kind of like jumping on the Eigenlayer kind of hype train, if you will. And I mean, I don't mean to be too pessimistic here, but I just think that that's going to happen and is happening. So we'll continue to kind of vet that and make sure that people are using, because like the core thing here is that we need to make sure that operators and LRTs are being properly risk managed, right? And so that's going to be a really, really interesting space to cover.
Absolutely.
And I think throughout this series, we'll cover a lot of like some of the risks as well as different mechanisms of slashing. And so excited to kind of dive more into the technicals there.
It's inherently a permissionless platform.
Correct.
So we
people
cannot control. Yeah, people are going to build shit, and we can't control whether they're going to ape in because of, they see it as an opportunity to align themselves with the right community, or if they're like building it because they want an actual value prop of like the slashing conditions, node operators, or using the intersubjective token itself.
Yep.
And so there's going to be like varying levels of stickiness in like the integration itself.
Correct.
And that's the point of a permissionless system. And in a properly self-functioning positive incentive design market, what will happen is you will have less stake and less operators serving these lower value additive teams.
Correct.
And you'll have
like the riskier ones.
Exactly. And you'll have the,
it's the power of law.
Exactly.
Yeah. Last thing, we're running low here. All chains fit on EigenDA.
Yeah, that was really fun. Came out of literally like Shriram having an idea of like, hey, like, why don't we just post every block from all of
every
the
chain.
every chain
every
onto
chain.
EigenDA.
Yeah.
That kind of goes to our like overall roadmaps. Like we have a lot of teams working on a lot of different things now. EigenDA has its own roadmap for like 100 megabytes per second by end of year, 1 gigabyte per second eventually. What are the use cases that we can open up? It's not just like something that we wanted to bootstrap the protocol with. It's not just like a proof of concept. It's something that like we think is a fundamental tool that's needed in the infrastructure layer for all L2s, for all projects. And as we go out and build this sort of AWS style stack and infrastructure layer, because our real goal is how do we convert cloud to crypto? How do we build the backend rails for onboarding the next generation of consumers? DA is going to be a huge part of that. And eventually it's going to be able to support things like live streaming, like, on-chain betting platforms, etc., where the amount of data is extremely high. And
what's funny is right now, EigenDA can handle it all, but I hope the future that we're going to requires a lot more data availability.
Exactly.
A lot more, hopefully a lot more DA.
Yeah, and one of the beautiful questions is like, what would it take to port over 10% of all Web 2 traffic onto Web 3.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Right.
what does the infrastructure look like?
Right.
And we are trying to
need more
build for
DA.
that future.
Yeah.
We're not trying to build for what is the utilization today.
Right.
And so, you know, for us at Eigen, it's always about identifying where is the market moving, what is the direction and the vector that we want to head in, and are we building infrastructure that aligns with that vector of the market?
Yeah.
Or do we need to push the market and push builders in that direction to some extent? Because we can come up with infrastructure and come up with use cases and encourage people to come and build. And that's where, again, the Eigen token comes into play, because we can have these, we can use that as a very positive incentive mechanism to like get people to come and build.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming out. It's been a pleasure. Congratulations on the success of the Eigen token transferability, and looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andy. Appreciate you taking your time. I know it's been a long day as well, but yeah, no, this has been amazing, and we're super excited to have the token out, super excited to, you know, be a player in this ecosystem for a long time. We're trying to build a 10, 20, 30 or 50-year company, and it's, you know, we operate similar to a Web 2 org to some extent, and like, I don't see that as a negative. Like, there are some really positive things that we want to steal from that. And I would just want to leave us with like one thing. Like, Gary Tan has a great quote, which is, the only status game that matters is, did you ever build something that people want? And we are focused on building things that people want and need. So the Eigen token is just like a step in that direction, and we have a long way to go.
Amazing. Thank you, man.
Thank you, brother.